Hello and welcome to my full review of Expeditions, a MudRunner game. Now I know I don't do full reviews very often, however I figured with Expeditions I would take the opportunity to do one considering how long I've been a continued fan of this series. And honestly, this series really has come such a long way over the course of a lot of the prior entries in the series. I remember playing the Spin Tires tech demo, the original Spin Tires tech demo, and remembering how advanced it was for its current time. However, it must have been really good, and it must still hold up today because this series is honestly still leaning on that technology even here in Expeditions. However, what Expeditions does is it takes that formula that the series has always had and kind of takes it in an evolutionary direction rather than a revolutionary direction. Now, say for example, instead of picking up where SnowRunner left off, it leans into the scouting-based gameplay way more heavily than prior games in the series. So essentially, if you love exploration and scouting and discovering every inch of a map, you'll love the gameplay of Expeditions. However, if you're more into hauling and say for example heavy cargo, you should probably stick to SnowRunner. And that's of course not to accuse Expeditions of not having a good enough variety of trucks, but more to just highlight the fact that that is not the type of gameplay that Expeditions leans into. But now let's switch the conversation over to a topic that has kind of always divided fans of this series, and that as the topic of physics. Now, if you've played any of the prior entries in this series, the physics will feel comfortable and familiar. Now, you do need to go ahead and keep in mind, though, that especially with the addition of adjustable tire pressure, tires have a lot more grip on rocks than they ever have before. SnowRunner was especially bad for this, considering most rocks felt like ice almost immediately upon touching them. Now, mod creators were able to fix this, or rather sort of bandage it, by developing their own rock physics for a lot of the modded maps. However, a lot of the vanilla maps that featured rock crawling sections were unfortunately let down quite a lot, to be honest, by the lack of overall rock grip and the fact that literally they just felt like ice the moment you would drive your truck onto them. However, thankfully, this has been upgraded quite a lot for Expeditions, and a lot of the ways that the tires interact with the rocky surfaces actually have a genuine feeling of realism to them. Next, we're going to talk about vehicle weight and vehicle mass. Now, vehicle weight and mass have kind of been another sticking point of the physics in this series over time, because that was something that got changed back and forth between, say, for example, original Spin Tires and then MudRunner and then SnowRunner, because in MudRunner, a lot of the vehicles felt fairly weighted, and they felt like they had a lot of mass going on, whereas in SnowRunner, honestly, a lot of the vehicles in SnowRunner felt like they almost had no weight and were basically the weight of like a piece of paper. And honestly, the weight of the vehicles, or rather the lack of vehicle weight and the lack of vehicle mass, kind of detracted a lot from the gameplay experience of SnowRunner for me. And the fact that the vehicle weight has been ramped back up here in Expeditions honestly is probably one of the best changes that I've personally seen to the way the physics feel. And I'm also genuinely crossing my fingers and hoping for the best that these changes of more heavily weighted vehicles kind of continue as a trend in this series moving forward, rather than kind of being an outlier here in Expeditions and not in the mainline games. And now let's switch the conversation over to gameplay. So as far as gameplay goes, this is obviously a evolutionary game and not a revolutionary game, meaning that if you have prior experience in this series, you'll totally be at home. You're not necessarily going to find anything that you're going to look at and say, oh my god, that's entirely new. I mean, obviously you're going to have new gameplay features, but none of them are so groundbreaking that they are going to change your opinion on the way the game feels. Now, I will say though, in terms of a lot of these new gameplay features, I do like a lot of them. I was worried that some of them were going to be almost gimmicky. However, after spending a considerable amount of time with the game now, a lot of these features actually feel quite well thought out as opposed to rushed or gimmicky or just added to be added. And of course, we have to talk about the adjustable tire pressure. Now, the adjustable tire pressure is a feature that a lot of people, myself included, have been wanting to see in this series for many, many years. And while I am so incredibly over the moon to see it available here, I'm also genuinely frustrated and annoyed that I haven't seen it in other places in the series that kind of, would benefit from it as well. Like, for example, do you have any idea how much SnowRunner would benefit from the addition of adjustable tire pressure? Now, who knows? SnowRunner may get that added in a later update, but I wouldn't hold my breath because I'm not quite sure how much extra coding work it would take to add a feature like that to an existing game. And I also don't know if it would mess with the physics system in ways that would throw some other things off. However, before we move on from this section though, I do want to mention that the winch anchor is probably my new favorite in terms of gadgets and gear, mainly because of the fact that I wasn't really all that excited about it until I used it. And then after I used it a few times, I was like, oh, this would honestly not only be great in this game, but would also make a lot of sense even in SnowRunner or other games in the series. For the next section, I do want to briefly talk about graphics. Now, graphics are not necessarily a major focus, or at least a major interest of mine, especially when it comes to games like this. I definitely prioritize gameplay over graphics. However, it's definitely worth noting some of the little changes that have been made between this game and the prior one. Now, in SnowRunner, there were a lot of areas where you could look closely and see a lot of grainy textures. However, here, a lot of the elements that had grainy textures before have been smoothed out. There's also a lot of other assets that are in this game that you can see throughout the maps that have been cleaned up a lot in kind of comparison to their SnowRunner counterparts. And a lot of this continues to play into how Expeditions is a upgrade, but not necessarily a revolution in terms of the way the game looks, feels, plays, sounds, and more. Now, obviously, there's not, that's not an across-the-board upgrade. Obviously, if you like heavy hauling, you're going to probably want to remain in SnowRunner and give Expeditions a pass. However, if you happen to see Expeditions on a deal a little bit later on down the road, I would still 100% recommend picking it up or trying it out if you consider, it to be something that isn't necessarily worth it to you at launch, but may be worth it to you on a bargain later. And of course, we have to talk about one of the constant mainstays of this series, and that is modding and mod support. Now, Expeditions has a very similar, if not almost identical, system for mod support as SnowRunner, because essentially what it does is it links your in-game account to mod.io, and then through mod.io, you can subscribe to different mods, and then your game will download them the next time it boots. And this system is available across both PC and console systems. However, it is worth noting, though, that if you see a mod on one of, say, for example, my own videos that you don't see on your console's mod browser, that just means that the development team has yet to approve that mod, and once it's approved, it will be there on your console mod browser for you to download and use. And in a way, it almost feels like SnowRunner all over again, because I remember when SnowRunner came out and I got a bunch of comments saying, you said this was a console mod, but I don't see it on my console mod browser. Where is it? And honestly, in almost every single case where that question is asked, it just means the mod needs to still be approved by the development team, and then it will become available on the mod browser on your console. So I know it's kind of annoying that mods take longer to make their way to console, but unfortunately it's kind of the system that we have to deal with. And it's also definitely better than having no mods on console at all, like we had back in the days of MudRunner, for example. And as we near the end of the review, I want to talk a little bit about the public perception around Expeditions that I have seen throughout the community, because depending on where you look, it's been wildly different. For example, I have honestly seen a lot of comments that are positive about this game. I've seen a lot of people saying they enjoy it, but I've also seen a similar amount of people that say it just looks like a copy-pasted SnowRunner with nothing different, nothing new, and they have no interest in it at all, and they will avoid it at all costs. And for one, that almost seems a little bit dramatic. It seems actually a lot more dramatic than I would have considered to be, I don't know, accurate for a game like this. It doesn't necessarily seem like a great response, because if you don't like it, if you don't want to play it, you don't have to. But at the same time, if others enjoy playing it, don't go after them. And of course, I understand entirely that this game may not fit the preferences of every fan of this series, and that's totally okay. However, what I don't understand is when people that are fans of other games in the series attack fans of the same series because they liked a game that the other group didn't like. And that just, like, it blows my mind, and it kind of breaks my brain. Because at the end of the day, we all ended up liking the same series, regardless of which games in that series we prefer. I don't think that should ever lead to any kind of, separation of the community. However, at the end of the day, players are going to gravitate to whichever game in the series suits them the best. And now, in conclusion, I want to go ahead and preface this part with the fact that I do not normally give score numbers. I don't necessarily always give review scores because I don't really like to. I usually like to put my opinion out there and then allow y'all to make up your own minds about what is important to you. However, for Expeditions, I will be giving a review score out of 10 because I kind of feel a little bit more comfortable giving this game a score, because if you've made it this far in the video, you do probably want to hear what my opinion on that is. So when it comes to the review score, this game is a 7.5 out of 10 for me. And honestly, it could have scored higher. However, honestly, the biggest thing that held it back, in my opinion, was mostly due to the occasional glitches that I ran into, an occasional lack of polish that I also ran into when faced with several physics explosions, where some of my vehicles were literally thrown off of the side of a hill. And that was without me doing anything at all to even get close to the edge of said hill. The game just was like, you're going this way now, enjoy yourself. But that is going to do it for my review of Expeditions, a MudRunner game. And if you enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. And if you have any other thoughts on the game, or whether or not you decided to pick it up, let me know in the comments down below as well. And I will see y'all next time.